The night shift at Galaxy Central Hospital was usually quiet. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the empty white halls, checking on her few patients. The small space hospital floated quietly among the stars, far from the busy space lanes. Most aliens went to their own hospitals, leaving the human doctors with little to do. Everything changed when the emergency alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed through the corridors. Sarah ran to the emergency bay with other doctors and nurses. Through the massive windows, they saw something huge approaching the hospital. It was bigger than their largest ambulance ship. Emergency landing request from the Royal Zexian Fleet, the computer announced. Patient condition: critical. The doctors looked at each other in shock. The Zexians were one of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. They never came to human hospitals. The ship's doors opened. Guards in shining armor marched out first. Then came the alien queen herself. She stood 3 times taller than any human, her silver skin gleaming under the emergency lights. But it was what came after her that made everyone step back in fear. A dragon. A real alien dragon. Its body was longer than 2 buses. Metallic scales covered its massive form, but many were cracked and broken. Green blood dripped from deep wounds across its sides. Each drop sizzled when it hit the floor, leaving smoking holes in the metal. "Please," the alien queen's voice boomed through the emergency bay. "7 hospitals have turned us away. None dare treat a stellar dragon. But my Shadowfang is dying." The dragon's head turned towards the doctors. Its eyes glowed like burning stars. Most of the medical staff backed away. Stories about stellar dragons were told across the galaxy. Stories of their strength, their acid blood, and their deadly temper. Dr. Marcus, the head doctor, stepped forward nervously. "Your Majesty, we're honored, but we've never treated anything like this. The dragon's blood could kill us all. Maybe the specialist hospitals." They refused. The queen cut him off. "They fear Shadowfang's reputation. He is the last of his kind, my most loyal guardian. Will no one help?" The dragon let out a low growl of pain. Its massive tail scraped against the floor, leaving deep scratches in the metal. More acid blood dripped from its wounds. In the frightened silence, Sarah took a step forward. She was the youngest doctor there, barely finished with her training. But something about the dragon's eyes caught her attention. Past the fierce glow, she saw pain, fear, intelligence. "I'll try," Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Dr. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Sarah, this is madness. One wrong move and that blood will melt right through you." But Sarah kept looking at the dragon. Shadowfang's massive head turned toward her. Those star-bright eyes locked onto hers. The emergency bay went completely silent. Then, very slowly, the huge dragon lowered its head. It was a gesture of trust. The alien queen's silver face showed surprise. In all his years of service, Shadowfang has never allowed a stranger so close. Sarah took a deep breath and walked toward the dragon. "I'll need a full medical team, and we'll have to modify our biggest treatment room." She looked up at the queen. "I don't know if I can save him, but I promise to try." The dragon made a soft, rumbling sound, almost like a purr. But as Sarah got closer, she saw how bad the wounds really were. Strange energy crackled around them, fighting against the dragon's natural healing. She had no idea how to treat a stellar dragon. One wrong move could mean death. For her, for the dragon, maybe for everyone in the hospital. But as she looked into those ancient, pained eyes, Sarah knew she had to try. "All right," she said, pulling on protective gear. "Let's begin." The biggest treatment room in Galaxy Central Hospital wasn't nearly big enough for a stellar dragon. Engineers worked fast to remove walls while Sarah studied Shadowfang's wounds. Each cut in the dragon's metallic scales glowed with strange purple energy. "These aren't normal injuries," Sarah said, scanning the wounds with her medical tools. The screen showed nothing but static. "What happened to him?" The alien queen's silver face darkened. "We were attacked by void pirates. Their weapons were different. Dark energy. Shadowfang took the hits meant for me. The dragon rumbled softly at the queen's words. Despite his pain, he still tried to lift his head to check on her. Sarah saw the deep bond between them. But there was a bigger problem. Every time Sarah tried to clean a wound, Shadowfang's natural healing powers fought against the medicine. The dragon's body rejected everything she tried. His healing factor is too strong, one nurse said, watching the medicine sizzle away. It thinks our treatments are attacks. Suddenly, Shadowfang's whole body shuddered. One of his massive wings knocked over a cart of medical supplies. The crash made everyone jump back, but Sarah stayed close. "Something's wrong," she said. "His temperature is rising too fast." The dragon's star-bright eyes were getting dimmer. His metallic scales, usually shining like mirrors, began to turn dull gray. Dr. Marcus checked the readings and shook his head. "We should stop," he warned. "If his blood reacts with our medicine, it could melt through the whole hospital." But Sarah noticed something strange. Where Shadowfang's blood had mixed with one particular medicine, the purple energy flickered. She grabbed the bottle, reading its label. "This is just simple cold medicine," she said, "from Earth. But look, it's affecting the dark energy." The alien queen leaned closer, her tall form casting shadows. "Impossible. That primitive medicine couldn't." She stopped as Shadowfang let out a roar of pain. The dragon's massive body curled tight, knocking over more equipment. The purple energy in his wounds began to spread. Sarah's mind raced. The cold medicine had done something, but why? She ran to the computer, searching through old files. There, in ancient Earth legends, she found stories about dragons, about their fire, their power, and their temperature. Sarah shouted. Earth dragons were cold-blooded. What if stellar dragons are the opposite? What if they're too hot? She turned to the queen. "Your Majesty, what's Shadowfang's normal temperature?" "The heat of a dying star," the queen replied. "That's why most medicines burn away." Sarah looked at the cold medicine, then at the dying dragon. She had an idea. A crazy, dangerous idea. "We need to build a freezing chamber," she said. "Big enough for him. If we can't cool his blood directly, we'll cool everything around him." Dr. Marcus stepped forward. "The hospital's cooling system isn't strong enough." "Then we'll use space itself," Sarah said. She pointed to the massive windows. "Space is near absolute zero. If we can control it right." She didn't finish because Shadowfang suddenly collapsed. His massive head hit the floor with a boom that shook the whole hospital. The purple energy was spreading faster now, covering more of his scales. The alien queen's silver hands gripped the wall, leaving dents in the metal. "Make your choice, human doctor. But know this, if Shadowfang dies, the peace between our worlds dies with him." Sarah looked at the dying dragon, then at the cold darkness of space beyond the windows. She had one chance to save him. One chance to prove that humans could do what no other race dared try. She took a deep breath and pressed the emergency override button. "Everyone out," she ordered. "I'm going to turn this whole section of the hospital into a freezing chamber." As alarms began to blare, Sarah knew she was either about to save the last stellar dragon in the galaxy or destroy the entire hospital trying. Warning lights flashed throughout Galaxy Central Hospital as Sarah started her dangerous plan. The temperature in the treatment section dropped fast. Ice crystals formed on the windows, spreading like delicate spider webs. Shadowfang lay still, his massive form taking up most of the room. The purple energy from his wounds pulsed like angry stars. Each pulse made the dragon's metallic scales darker, spreading the infection. "The cooling system is at maximum," a technician called from the safety room. "But it's not cold enough." Sarah checked her tablet. The dragon's body was still burning hot, fighting against their efforts to cool them. She needed something more. Then she remembered an old story her grandmother used to tell. A legend about Chinese dragons who could control the weather, about how they made winter storms to heal themselves. "Your Majesty," Sarah turned to the alien queen, who watched through the safety glass. Do stellar dragons have any connection to ice or cold space? The Queen's silver face showed surprise. Yes, when wounded they used to fly through the coldest parts of space, through ice nebulas. But those places are gone now, destroyed in the Great Wars. Sarah's eyes lit up. That's it. His body isn't fighting our medicine. It's trying to tell us what it needs. She ran to the hospital's main computer. Computer, show me the composition of an ice nebula. Numbers and formulas filled the screen. Sarah's hands flew over the controls, mixing medicines and chemicals that matched the nebula's pattern. Dr. Marcus watched in horror. Sarah, stop. Mixing those chemicals in these temperatures could create artificial space ice. Sarah finished. Exactly what Shadowfang's body is looking for, but they had another problem. The hospital's chemical lab was in a different section, blocked off by emergency doors. Someone would have to go get the chemicals while wearing a special suit to survive the freezing temperatures. Sarah started putting on a suit, but the alien queen stepped forward. No, my people can survive extreme cold. I will go. Everyone stared in shock. Queens didn't run errands, but before anyone could argue, she was already moving through the frozen corridor, her silver form gliding like a ghost through the ice crystals. Meanwhile, Shadowfang's condition got worse. The dragon's breathing slowed. Ice formed on his scales, but the purple energy fought against it, creating clouds of steam. His heart rate is dropping, a nurse warned. We're losing him. The Queen returned, carrying containers of chemicals. Working together, Sarah and the Queen mixed them according to Sarah's calculations. The result was a glowing blue liquid that seemed to float in the air. It's missing something, Sarah muttered. The mixture was close to nebula ice, but not quite right. She looked at the dragon's wounds again. Then she saw it. Tiny sparks of starlight still glinted in Shadowfang's scales, fighting against the dark energy. Your Majesty, stellar dragons are born in stars, right? They have star energy in their blood. The Queen nodded. Yes, but... She stopped, understanding. You want me to. We need a drop of your blood, Sarah said. You're his rider. You share his star energy. This was another shocking request. Royal blood was sacred, but the Queen didn't hesitate. She pressed her hand against a sharp edge of ice, letting a single drop of glowing silver blood fall into the mixture. The blue liquid transformed instantly, becoming a swirling galaxy of ice and starlight. Sarah lifted the container. This is either going to save him, or... She never finished, because at that moment, Shadowfang's eyes snapped open. The dragon lifted his massive head, staring directly at the mixture. His star-bright eyes focused on it like a dying man seeing water in a desert. The whole hospital seemed to hold its breath. Sarah stepped forward with the mixture, knowing the next few moments would either heal the last stellar dragon in existence, or prove that humans shouldn't meddle in alien medicine after all. The moment Sarah poured the glowing mixture onto Shadowfang's first wound, everything changed. The dragon's entire body lit up like a supernova. His star-bright eyes blazed with new energy, and his roar shook the whole hospital. Everyone brace yourselves, Sarah shouted as medical equipment crashed around them. The mixture of artificial nebula ice and royal blood fought against the purple energy in the wounds. Where they met, sparks flew like miniature lightning storms. The dragon's metallic scales shifted colors, from dull gray to burning gold to deep blue. Through the safety glass, Dr. Marcus watched in horror. The temperature changes are too extreme. The hospital's structure can't take it. He was right. Where Shadowfang's body touched the floor, the metal froze and cracked. But where the purple energy escaped, it melted everything it touched. Alarms blared as whole sections of the hospital began to break down. We need to evacuate the other patients, a nurse shouted. But Sarah couldn't leave. The mixture was working, but she needed to apply it to all of Shadowfang's wounds. Each time she got close, the dragon's thrashing nearly knocked her across the room. The alien queen stepped forward again. Let me help. She placed her silver hand on Shadowfang's head, and the dragon grew calmer. He trusts you, human doctor, but the pain. It brings back memories of the attack. Working together, Sarah and the queen moved from wound to wound. Each time they applied the mixture, more purple energy was forced out. But the process was violent. Ice spread across the walls while holes melted in the floor. The viewing windows cracked from the pressure changes. Suddenly, something went wrong. The purple energy didn't just fight back. It formed into shades. Shadow creatures rose from Shadowfang's wounds, their forms made of dark energy. Void pirates' magic. The queen hissed. Their weapons left traps inside him. The shadow creatures lunged at Sarah. She dove behind a frozen medical cart, feeling their cold energy pass over her. The queen drew a silver sword from nowhere, slicing through the shadows, but more kept forming. "We have to finish the treatment," Sarah called out. "The mixture is the only thing driving them out." She grabbed the last container of glowing liquid and ran toward Shadowfang's largest wound. Shadow creatures chased her, their dark forms eating through the ice and metal around them. The dragon saw her coming. Despite his pain, he used his massive tail to sweep away the shadows near her. The queen's sword flashed, cutting a path through the others. Sarah reached the wound just as the hospital's structure groaned dangerously. The whole section was breaking apart. Ice covered everything, broken by holes of melted metal where shadow creatures had passed. "Sarah, get out of there," Dr. Marcus yelled through the cracking safety glass. "The whole section is about to break off." But Sarah had one chance. She lifted the last of the mixture, ready to pour it into the final wound. This would either cure Shadowfang or tear the hospital apart. That's when she saw it. The shadow creatures weren't just attacking randomly. They were forming a pattern around Shadowfang's heart. The purple energy pulsed there, strongest of all. "They're trying to stop his heart," Sarah realized. "Your Majesty, we need to." She never finished. Because at that moment, Shadowfang's mighty heart, which had survived wars, space battles, and countless years, finally gave out. The dragon's star-bright eyes dimmed. His massive body went still. The shadow creatures surged forward in triumph. And Sarah, standing there with the last of their miracle cure, had to make an impossible choice in the next few seconds, before either the hospital collapsed or the shadow creatures reached her. Time seemed to freeze as Shadowfang's heart stopped beating. The shadow creatures paused their attack, sensing their victory. Through the cracking windows, Sarah saw other doctors shouting, but she couldn't hear them over the sound of her own heartbeat. Then she saw something no one else noticed. Inside the dragon's largest wound, near his heart, a tiny spark of starlight still flickered. Sarah made her choice. Instead of running, she climbed onto Shadowfang's still chest. Shadow creatures clawed at her suit, but the queen fought them back with her silver sword. "What are you doing?" the queen called. "His heart hasn't completely stopped," Sarah shouted back. "It's like hibernation. Deep space hibernation." She remembered reading about how space creatures survived long journeys through the coldest parts of space. If Shadowfang was truly a creature of the stars, maybe. Sarah poured half of the remaining mixture directly over the dragon's heart. The liquid spread across his scales, forming patterns like constellations. "Your Majesty, put your hand here." Sarah pointed to where the patterns were brightest. "He needs your star energy." The queen understood. She pressed her silver hand against Shadowfang's chest, adding her own light to the glowing patterns. Sarah placed her hands next to the queen's. "Now what?" the queen asked as shadow creatures circled them. "We need extreme cold," Sarah said. "Computer, open the emergency airlocks." Warning: exposing this section to space will cause catastrophic damage. The computer responded. "Do it." The outer doors began to open. The vacuum of space pulled at everything, but Sarah and the queen held onto Shadowfang's scales. Ice formed instantly around them. The shadow creatures screeched as the cold of space touched them. Sarah took out a small device from her pocket, her grandmother's old music player. Dragons in Earth Stories. They respond to music. She pressed play. The sound of an ancient Chinese flute filled the freezing air, fighting against the roar of escaping oxygen. It was the song her grandmother played when telling stories about winter dragons. The queen looked at her like she was crazy. But then something amazing happened. The starlight patterns on Shadowfang's scales began pulsing in rhythm with the music. Each pulse grew stronger, spreading through his body like waves of light. The frequency, Sarah realized. It's matching his natural healing rhythm. She poured the last of the mixture in a spiral pattern over the dragon's heart, matching the music's flow. The queen's silver blood in the mixture glowed brighter, resonating with the starlight in Shadowfang's scales. Suddenly, the dragon's chest moved, just a tiny shift. But Sarah felt it. The shadow creatures shrieked and tried to dive back into the wounds. "Oh no, you don't," Sarah muttered. She pulled out a small mirror from her medical kit and positioned it to catch light from the nearest star. "Your creatures avoid. Let's give you some starlight." The reflected starlight hit the shadows, making them recoil. Where star, music, and medicine met, the shadows began to dissolve. Deep inside Shadowfang's chest, a new sound started, like distant thunder growing louder, like a storm building in space. His heart wasn't just restarting, it was transforming. The queen's eyes widened. This is impossible. He's entering Starheart state, a legendary healing trance that no dragon has achieved in 1,000 years. Shadowfang's body began to glow from within. Where before his scales had reflected light like mirrors, now they were creating light of their own. His heart was becoming a miniature star. But they weren't safe yet. The hospital section was breaking apart, pulled toward space. The cold was becoming deadly even through their suits. And most dangerous of all, no one knew what would happen when a dragon with a star for a heart woke up in the middle of a human hospital. Sarah looked at her vital signs monitor. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before everything either came together or fell apart completely. Shadowfang's transformation shook the entire hospital. His heart, now a burning star, pulsed with waves of pure energy. Each beat sent ripples of light through his metallic scales, changing them from silver to colors humans had no names for. "Close the airlocks," Sarah shouted as she held onto the dragon's scales. The vacuum of space had done its work. The shadow creatures were gone, frozen and shattered in the void. As the doors sealed, something extraordinary happened. The light from Shadowfang's Starheart began to repair the damage around them. Melted metal flowed back into place. Broken windows healed themselves. Even the ice transformed into beautiful crystal patterns. The queen watched in awe. The ancient texts spoke of this. When a stellar dragon achieves Starheart state, they can remake reality itself. But Sarah noticed something wrong. The dragon's new power was healing everything except his own wounds. The dark energy was still there, pushed back, but not defeated. Then she remembered another detail from her grandmother's stories, about how Chinese dragons couldn't heal themselves. They needed human faith to maintain their power. "He needs a connection," Sarah said suddenly, "not just to stars, but to life itself." She pulled off her protective glove, despite the extreme temperatures still swirling around them. The queen grabbed her arm. "Your human flesh cannot touch a Starheart dragon. The energy will burn you away." But Sarah looked at Shadowfang's face. Those star-bright eyes were watching her, filled with something she never expected to see in an ancient space dragon. "Trust. Sometimes healing goes both ways," Sarah said, and pressed her bare hand against his scales. The connection was instant and overwhelming. Sarah felt the power of stars flowing through her veins, but instead of burning her, it showed her visions. She saw Shadowfang as a young dragon, learning to fly between stars. She saw him meeting the queen, then just a princess, saving her from space pirates. She saw countless battles, peaceful missions, years of loyalty. And Shadowfang saw her memories too. Childhood dreams of space, her grandmother's stories, years of study. the desire to heal, to help, to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. Their minds touched, and in that moment, something unprecedented happened. The dragon's star energy merged with human compassion. Ancient space magic combined with earth medicine. Shadowfang's wounds began to heal, not with burning energy, but with a gentle light that spread like sunrise. The dark energy had no defense against this new power, half star, half soul. The dragon lifted his massive head, his eyes now shining with a warm golden light. He looked at Sarah and did something no human had ever seen before. He smiled. But the miracle wasn't over. Where Sarah's hand touched his scales, new patterns formed. Star maps appeared, showing places long lost. And in the center, brightest of all, was a series of symbols. The queen gasped, the ancient star language. But how? Before she could finish, Shadowfang's consciousness touched Sarah's mind again. This time, he had a message, an urgent warning about why the Void Pirates had attacked, and what their weapons were really designed to do. What Sarah saw in that vision made her blood run cold, because the purple energy that had nearly killed Shadowfang wasn't just a weapon. It was the first wave of an invasion that could destroy everything, human and alien alike. The dragon rumbled softly, his star heart pulsing with determination. He had found something more valuable than healing. He had found a partner for the coming battle. Sarah looked at the star maps on his scales, then at the queen. Your Majesty, we need to talk about what's coming, and why Earth's dragons might be more important than anyone knew. 3 days after Shadowfang's miraculous recovery, Galaxy Central Hospital received visitors from across the galaxy. The same alien races that had refused to help now came seeking answers, but they found the emergency bay empty, with only a young nurse to greet them. Where is the human doctor? They demanded. The one who mastered dragon healing. The nurse just smiled and pointed to the observation window. Outside, against the backdrop of stars, something impossible was happening. Sarah floated in space without a suit, surrounded by a bubble of golden starlight. Beside her, Shadowfang's massive form curved protectively around her. The dragon's star heart pulse kept her safe, letting her breathe in the vacuum of space. On his scales, the ancient star maps glowed brighter each day. They revealed a network of lost dragon sanctuaries, hidden in the spaces between stars. Places where Earth dragons had fled thousands of years ago, when humans forgot their connection to the stars. The alien queen stood on her ship's observation deck, watching Sarah and Shadowfang work. The prophecy was incomplete, she said to her advisors. We thought it spoke of one dragon's healing. Now we know it meant healing the connection between all species. Shadowfang had discovered why the Void Pirates' weapons worked so well. They weren't just attacking his body. They were trying to sever the ancient bonds between dragons, humans, and stars. The same bonds that kept the galaxy in balance. Sarah pressed her hand against Shadowfang's scales, their minds connecting instantly. Through their shared consciousness, she saw the truth about Earth's dragons. They hadn't died out. They had gone to space, waiting for humans to remember them. Ready to try something new, Sarah thought to the dragon. Shadowfang rumbled happily. His star heart pulse quickened as Sarah pulled out her grandmother's flute. In the vacuum of space, no sound carried, but something else did. As Sarah played, starlight danced from the flute. The music became visible, waves of light and energy that matched the patterns on Shadowfang's scales. Where the light touched the stars, long dormant signals awakened. Deep in distant nebulas, ancient eyes opened. Dragons of all kinds, star dragons, void dragons, quantum dragons, stirred from their sleep. Earth's long-lost dragons heard the call of their star kin. The Void Pirates had wanted to prevent this awakening. They feared the power of united species, but they hadn't counted on the simplest magic of all, a human who still believed in dragons. Sarah stopped playing as a new light appeared. A tear in space itself opened, showing a realm between stars. Through it came the first Earth dragon seen in 1,000 years, its scales shimmering with familiar constellations. Shadowfang's star heart pulse sent out a message in the ancient star language, visible as patterns of light. The healing has begun. The barriers between worlds are falling. Sarah touched the star maps on his scales one last time. They showed her visions of what was coming. Dragons and humans working together again. Healing arts combining earth wisdom and star magic. A new age of exploration and understanding. But first, they had work to do. The Void Pirates were still out there, gathering dark energy for their final attack. They didn't know that their weapons had actually helped create something new. The first human-dragon healing bond in history. Sarah smiled as more dragons emerged from deep space, answering Shadowfang's call. Humans had forgotten their connection to dragons, but dragons had never forgotten them. All it took was one person willing to try something impossible. She looked at the hospital where it all started, then at the endless stars ahead, ready to show them what earth medicine and star magic can really do. Shadowfang's star-bright eyes gleamed with joy. His star heart pulse merged with Sarah's heartbeat, creating a harmony that echoed through space. Together, they turned toward the gathering of ancient dragons, ready to face whatever the void might bring. Because sometimes the greatest healers are the ones who remember that magic and medicine, stars and souls, dragons and humans, were never meant to be separated at all.